And, we've got an incredible diaspora around the world as well that is just as passionate about ensuring that Africa continues to be a trailblazing continent. Own your space unapologetically. Have fun, know that you deserve it, and let's go create meaningful and positive impact together.
Hello, friends. Welcome to another insightful episode of Ready Next. I'm really excited about this one as I have our very first guest on the show in the person of Fathima Beckmann. Fathima is a seasoned global DEI and communications leader who up until very recently was Senior Vice President Global Inclusion at Paramount International. Prior to that, she was Communications Director at Viacom Africa. Her rich career has taken her all over the world where she's worked in a myriad of frontier industries, financial services with the likes of Old Mutual, big tech with Microsoft, Huawei, and Intel, and of course, in media with the likes of MultiChoice and, as I mentioned earlier, Viacom and then Paramount. An all-round amazing human being. Fathima is really passionate about inclusive cultures in business and sustainability, especially themes like food security, which we will also aim to touch on in a little bit. Today's episode is titled Co-Creating Impact from Africa to the World. With that said, Fathima, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you onto the Ready Next podcast. Welcome to the show.
Tosin, thank you for your incredible welcome, your warmth, and your encouragement to have conversations that really matter in the era of humanity. It is such an honor to be your first inaugural guest on Ready Next, and I'd like to also take the opportunity to congratulate you for creating this important platform for critical dialogue on pertinent issues that we're all globally facing.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I couldn't imagine a better first guest to have on the podcast. Thank you for accepting our invitation and for being here. I think for me, it is quite pertinent to start at the very beginning and talk a little bit about your background. It will give our audience a bit of insight into how you then managed later on to navigate these amazing industries and the fantastic career you've had so far. So please talk to us a little bit about your journey and what really kind of has shaped your perspective over the years.
Thank you, Tosin. And I also want to share and extend greetings to all your listeners who are tuned in to us today as well. I think my own personal reflection, currently I'm a media, tech and board executive leader, as you've described, with global experience in multicultural diversity, equity, inclusion and communication. I'm currently based in Madrid with my husband and our 2 children. And prior to that, we were based in South Africa, where I was born and where I grew up and began my initial academic education. And I grew up in the Drakensberg Valley in a beautiful town called Escort in KwaZulu-Natal. The village at that point, before it had grown into a town, in 1863 was actually named after Thomas Escort, an English parliamentarian who sponsored the immigration of settlers there. Now, this was during the colonial era of South Africa and Africa. Prior to colonization, the original people that walked this land were called the Bushmen or the Sand People. Right. By the 1400s, the Nguni tribes arrived in northern KwaZulu-Natal, and by the 1800s, the British had made their way. Now, during this time and transition, from 1948 to kind of the early 1990s, South Africa was in an apartheid institutionalized racial segregation system in both South Africa and Southwest Africa, which is now called Namibia. And essentially, it was also illegal for South African citizens to pursue interracial relations. Now, at that point, we were classified into racial groups: Black, Indian, colored, non-white, and white. And our locations were classified according to our race. This meant that people of color were not allowed access to beaches, to public toilets. In fact, the language at that time was Afrikaans, now an official language, one of 12 official languages in South Africa.
Yes.
But at that point,
Yes.
it was the only official language for working communication and education. Black and Indians and colored citizens were not allowed to engage in voting or in politics, and essentially were reduced to labor for the white population. This obviously sparked an internal resistance. I should also at this point share that my parents were actually interracial. So I grew up in this interracial community with a very strong awareness of the separation of races, the diversity of languages, the lack of access of education for schooling and university. When I was 9, one of the first movies I watched in cinema was the biography of Mahatma Gandhi. It was Richard Attenborough's biography. And at that time, It was portrayed by Ben Kingsley. Of course, this was the era of media and entertainment that lacked diverse and authentic character representation and access. Now, the story and the biography of Gandhi is a very specific contribution to the history and ultimate liberation of the South African community. South Africans are very fond of saying, India gave us a Mohandas, but we gave them a Mahatma. Gandhi lived in South Africa for over 21 years, and he really focused on what he had started to write around peaceful opposition, called Satyagraha. He was actually a student from the UK. He studied law in the UK and then moved to South Africa, where he spent 21 years trying to shape the destinies of future generations. So these, in essence, were the sugarcane laborers that came from India. And this became intimately linked to the broader freedom struggle of South Africa. This year, we celebrate 33 years of Madiba being released from prison. Madiba was released in 1990. I remember this so clearly. I was in Standard 9 at the time, and everybody stopped. We all stopped to honor this incredible moment because we knew that our lives were fundamentally changing. Madiba then took over first democratic election in 1994. And of course, he was our president from 1994 to 1999. And bear in mind that I'm still this young girl, working my way through my academic and now post-school academic path. But it already, brought into my, kind of thought processes, my entire living, my philosophy around life was built around understanding how do we mobilize unity? How do we mobilize collaboration? How do we mobilize access for what? I was part of that community. We were underserved. We were underrepresented. Additionally, I also came from a single parent home. My mom was a single mom. I lost my dad through mental health issues when I was just 3. And so I understand the incredible generational trauma that comes with having to lose a parent through mental health, from having to grow up in kind of a poverty environment where you have a single parent being the sole provider for their child. And she did a phenomenal job, and I'm always so grateful, and I have immense gratitude for single parents, and in particular single moms who face this challenge. And I pause on the statistic, Tosin, because currently it's a growing statistic. Single moms are a growing demographic, and it's very crucial that we pay attention to the societal challenges and really mobilize resources around supporting single moms and children in single homes, or children where, in Africa and certainly Latin America, we are now seeing children who are in caregiver homes. So we're older children who've lost both parents for different reasons are also having to step in and become caregivers. This,
Yes.
really gives you a context. And Madiba at this point became a very critical influencer in my life because he spoke, he spoke around gender equity. He started to speak about women's rights. He started to
Yes,
speak
he
about
did.
equity for women, for children. He started to mobilize educational access for children and for the youth. And he did this in very strong collaboration and partnerships, both within the country and across the globe internationally. And what he really sparked was we are not alone. And we cannot achieve any of this in isolation.
No.
Right? We have to lean into the power of collaboration to be able to mobilize. And so, that really led to this really powerful, passion and inspiration within my heart and within my essence and my North Star of how can I make a difference? How can
Hmm.
I equally start to play a role in creating and becoming a leader that can give back to my society and give back to our communities, not only in South Africa, but to our continent and, in essence, to our global family.
Thanks, Fatima, for those amazing insights. I think leaning in a little bit more in terms of what's happening in Africa, I'm sure you're seeing quite some remarkable work being done on the ground. Would you mind highlighting some of the great, or spotlighting some of the great work that you are seeing and have been part of in recent times?
I mean, wow, Africa obviously has such a special place in our hearts, Tosin, being our motherland and our homeland. And, honestly, there's no better place in the world, I feel. And of course, I'm a little biased in this because,
Yes.
having grown up on the African continent, we get exposed to such an incredible diversity of ethnicity, of languages. South Africa alone has 12 official languages, one of which is sign language. And, while the continent clearly does face significant challenges that are generationally inherited, and certainly, in more recent decades, there's a greater responsibility that comes with our leaders, of the continent, whereby we have to be accountable in really creating infrastructure, education access that supports this incredible powerhouse of Africans on the continent. And, we've got an incredible diaspora around the world as well that is just as passionate about ensuring that Africa continues to be a trailblazing continent. We got to work with Idris Elba, and through YouTube, and Alex Okozie on the Africa Day concert during COVID. And, Idris Elba is just such an incredible champion. He really upholds his commitment to ensuring that the African narrative and reimagining this narrative is the work that we do and embrace every single day. And there's so many other Africans that are doing this. Nomzamo Mbatha, who, I also got to work with. She actually started out as a VJ. She got second place. It was a VJ competition. And she was placed second. So she didn't win that year. But, she was just so committed, so passionate that she continued to really work with MTV and within the Paramount house. And she got to star alongside Eddie Murphy in Coming to America.
Incredible.
Isn't that incredible? What an incredible story. I love her story. And Nomzamo really is a formidable woman when it comes to owning African culture. She's just portrayed Queen Nandi in the epic production, South African production on Shaka Zulu. MultiChoice has aired this incredible series, and the series that Nomzamo participates in really upholds the African language, the Zulu culture. And, you know, Shaka Zulu was a king, and his mom was his counsel. So it really speaks to the place that women actually had in cultures many centuries ago. And I think this is so important to spotlight when we consider our own progression. I look at Nomzamo, she's equally powerful about taking everyone on the journey. She's created Lighthouse Foundation, which is really a foundation that gives back to young women in South Africa. So she's become a really strong advocate for elevating our continent and our African community. Staying in the music and media entertainment industry, you know, we can't not mention the incredible success that Tiwa Savage, Yemi Alade, Angelique Kidjo. Angelique is phenomenal because she's also led tremendous work through UNICEF in terms of advocating for the rights of women and children and health access on the continent. Shoma Josie, who's also won global awards, is really passionate about hair, you know, and cultural dress. She integrates authentic hair and authentic clothing and design, and she is a huge ambassador and inspiration for young African girls around the world. You know, recently Rayma hit the billion mark for his Spotify streaming. He reached 1 billion streams for his Calm Down collaboration with Selena Gomez. And this is incredible. He's a young artist. He's got great values, and he's passionate about what he does. And as he authentically creates his own success, he takes the entire continent with him.
Yes.
Now, if you've been following the US Open, championships, the world has been inspired by Coco. Her incredible win.
I'm definitely Team Coco.
Yes, 100%.
Yes.
And there's another team that we need to be behind, and this is really in the US Open doubles champion, our very own South African Kgokatso Montjane, together with a Japanese partner, Yuji Kamiji, they actually snatched up the doubles champion. They're both wheelchair tennis aces. And this is an incredible achievement. So, I think when you look at how far the African continent has come, there's so much talent. And I really, this talent has always been there. When I look back to when I first started in the IT and tech industry, that talent was already there. The talent is still here. And we, as, the African diaspora, as African citizens, and as a global community, need to continue to create spaces where African voices can be heard, where African talent can be represented, and where African leaders can really illustrate the remarkable ability that they have in driving passion and unification of our people. I also have to shine a spotlight on my dear friend, Samuel Mensah. He's launched a company called Kisua. He comes from the tech industry. Kisua is a fashion house, and, he's really ready to take over the world. Kisua's fashion has been worn by Beyonce. It's been worn by Michelle Obama. And, what I love about what Kgsua is creating is authentic African designs for men and women's fashion, African art. There's a shoe line now. And I mean, we just have so much color, so much vibrancy as Africans, don't we?
So much color, so much culture,
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And,
Fantastic.
It is. It really is. It's so inspiring. And, I'm excited about where we are. Let's not, the work that needs to be done is challenging. It is not easy. It is uncomfortable. But it is only by working through it with that humility, with that ability of saying, I'm here as the student, I'm here to learn, and I want to be accountable, that we can really create this positive impact and change that we want in our society.
I segue a little bit to now focus a little on your journey in terms of your career. You've gone through different industries. You've lived in different locations and different cultures. What has that journey been like?
Tosin, thank you. And, I honestly get such a kind of an exhilaration around
Yes.
this journey that I've been gifted to traverse. When I look at my
Yes.
career, Tosin, in high school, I went to Drakensberg Secondary School. And when I got to, at that point, standard 8, I was one of 20 students who had the
Right.
opportunity to be the first class of computer science and electronics. This was incredible. Computer science arrived as a subject, at the high
Amazing.
school. Do you remember that moment?
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
And it really sparked with context of what I've shared with you, this thirst for change, this thirst for impact. And now
Yes.
this innovation, the spark, I could see it as a spark, the spark of innovation and something new that I just knew was going to shift humanity and change our lives onto a
Yes.
completely different path. And so there we were, obviously, this incredible gift. And the reason why we were only 20 students was we had to have compulsory subjects of mathematics and physical science to be able to be either a computer science or electronics student. And so
Yes.
that narrowed down the number of computer science and electronics students. And
Yes.
later on in my life, you'll see, and I know we'll talk about it, is I specifically became a board member for NGOs that were investing in educating young people for maths and science, because in my early childhood, I recall how this created limited access, a limited pool
Yes.
for students to be able to participate. And that really
Yeah.
sparked my journey into technology. I then graduated from high school and I left Escort, as all young people do in small towns, to
Yes.
seek our fortune and
Yes.
fame, in the golden.
Explore the wider world.
Exactly.
Yes.
And so,
Yes.
I left Escort and I went to Johannesburg to live with my aunt, my mom's sister, who gave me a home, within her home. She was my second mom. And I was grateful, for this opportunity. And I started to seek my career. And this is where I started to study first in Dunlin College with public relations, and then in market research, and then later a communications degree with the University of South Africa. But career wise, while I armed myself with communication academic accolades, I was really pursuing the technology space, and I landed my first role in technology with a company called Global One, based out of Washington, D.C. At that point, they were
Right.
really a pioneer in the telco and internet industry. South Africa was not even regulatory set up at the time for the technology that
Wow.
Global One was bringing. And I even remember working not only with the South African government, but working with Nitel to start to influence policies and regulatory that would open up the market to create access for telco and the burgeoning internet industry. And I joined the team as a marketer. And it was really the pioneering era. So many of my colleagues then were really creating the very early onsets. I remember Andile Nkabo, who now is a trailblazer in the telecoms industry. He actually made his journey through the government environment as
Right.
minister of IT and telecommunications, and a really good friend. We were excited for the potential. We started to engage multi countries around mobilizing the impact of telco and the
Wow.
opportunity it brought from academic to infrastructure to business and socioeconomic benefits.
I want to make a big segue, and talk about another passion point of yours, which is around sustainability and, living in a healthier, better, smarter and more sustainable world. I know you have a passion, for food security, especially what we can do on a very sort of micro, even, family scale. You talked to me before the show about urban gardening and what, simple initiatives, in your community can roll up into having massive impact on society. So I want you to give us a glimpse of, that side of you, your thinking on food sustainability, urban gardening, and give us a glimpse into a better future.
Thank you, Tosin. And, indeed, this is a real passion point for me in my career. I've had extensive experience in driving strategic alliances through public-private partnerships. And I've had the joy of collaborating with leaders and teams from Global Citizen, UNICEF, the UN World Food Programme. We spoke about Madiba earlier, and Mama Grassa has got the Grassa Marshall Trust. And I've worked closely with Malaria No More as well. And there is this intersectionality that I experience in my career where I'm focused on mobilizing and inspiring multicultural workforces, partners and communities to a unified purpose, and how we foster, meaningful and positive change. Now, for over a decade, I've served as a non-executive specifically on NGOs that are focused on empowering underrepresented youth and women in underserved communities. And this is, I want to segue into my family's kind of history. My mom's father, John Abrahams, lived on Zeelager Farm in Escort. It was a very unique time in society. Zeelager Farm had a mixed community. This was still during apartheid South Africa. So it was a mixed people of color community. And he had an incredible garden on the farm. My grandparents grew their own fruit and vegetables in their backyard. In my mom's words, she would describe to me the big tree of pink mulberries, the trees of yellow cling peaches, her grapevines in the front of the house, the red grapevines on the side of the house, the apricot trees and white and red figs that she would pick as a young girl. They would harvest their own mealies, their own potatoes and pumpkins. And, her mom would adorn their patio with geraniums, dahlias, and red cannas. And this really, when my mom would describe this to me as a child, I would imagine this incredible lifestyle. And my father's side, my grandfather's brother equally had an orchard where he harvested and grew all his own vegetables. And often after school, I would help him in the orchard, plant and nurture and harvest. And so growing our own became a real passion of mine. And when we had children, I transformed our garden in Johannesburg into an urban garden. Wow. I was also a vegan for a decade before I had children. It was, a transition in my diet for health and nutrition reasons. And I started to become really focused around nutrition, what we put into our body, and what we put into our bodies really is the gift of our health. And I started to pay a lot more attention to the nutrition that exists in plants, but also the high nutrition that we have in fruit and vegetables that we grow in our own backyard that are free of pesticides, that are free of synthetic kind of nutrients that are sometimes, and oftentimes I should say, integrated into mass scale farming. So this return to more organic farming, a more sustainable farming, when you look at the diversity of
Yes.
agriculture that we have across the continent and the scale of it.
Yes.
And, the Grosser Marshall Foundation is doing incredible work together with the World Food Program in really mobilizing programs that support women in becoming self-sustainable through agricultural investment and women-owned and women-managed farms. Now,
Brilliant.
I love cooking. It's another one of my passions. And
Yeah.
over the years, I've started to develop the recipes into a book, and the book is called A Spoonful of Love. And I've partnered with UNICEF on the book. And some of the great work that we've done is in South Africa, we face, and not only South Africa, in Africa, and I know in other parts of the world, we face challenges around students and young children who either have working parents or caregivers who are youth. There's a large amount of young people who don't have safe spaces after school. UNICEF has created safe parks and safe communities in areas like Soweto, Salt River, and Cape Town. These are safe spaces where children can go after school. They get a healthy meal. They get youth mentors that support them with homework, with reading, and now with developing gardens, so growing their own.
Wow.
UNICEF has partnered with Progress London, and this is led by Simon Gartney. And Simon and his team are incredible. They've created food gardens, not only in the UK, but this is Simon's passion. He's brought many of them to Africa. And it's, an incredible joy to work with the UNICEF team to actually build and create food gardens for safe communities around Africa. And this concept is moving into refugee camps as well.
Wow.
So that, when you have refugees that are, between borders over long periods of time, how do we create motivation and inspiration within these environments? UNICEF and the World Food Program are really leading the charge here to create sustainability and to build nutrition. When we look at what we were describing, Tosin, in terms of the society of upskilled talent, we've got to start with the basics, which are the protection and safety of children in underserved communities. We also have an alarming nutrition challenge, malnutritional challenge through neglected food system. So what we're looking to do through sustainable food environments is collectively strengthen food systems so that we're able to actually create an environment where we have a healthy, thriving community. You've seen this coming through, Michelle Obama's book. She wrote a book on the kitchen garden, and that's something that she's pioneering. Yes. This is happening all across Europe, China, and Africa. And, when we look at our history, our ancestors lived in this environment where they thrived off the land that they lived on. So I think we've got to take this power of the industrial revolution that we live in, the fourth industrial revolution, and partner it with sustainability so that we're able to create thriving societies globally.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. If I try to unpack that, we will probably go on for another hour or two, but some things stood out for me. You spoke, and I think this is one of the many quotes, but one that really stands out to me from this episode is that what we put in our bodies is really the gift of our health. So if you want to be healthier, the number one place to start is with thinking about what you are eating, and as you advocate, trying to have as much control over that as possible. If you are able to achieve farm to table in some way, shape, or form, that's even so much better. And I love the concept of, emancipating, refugees in their camps by teaching them and training them to be self-sustaining and self-sufficient, to grow their own crops and be able to manage their own food security internally. Because when we think about refugees, there is this concept of, camps that are just sort of absolutely dejected and deprived. But you can teach these people skills. So whilst they're in a transitory phase and waiting for the change of their lives, they can still be self-sufficient, maintain their human dignity, and be able to look forward to a better day. I love those concepts. It's been such an amazing episode. As we wrap up, I really want to kind of ask a little bit off the cuff that you share some concluding thoughts around what folks in especially the tech industry and maybe focused on young women and girls, how they should think about their careers, especially those who are either just making an entrance or at the early stages of taking those, first few steps of their career. How can they kind of start framing their thinking? I think that will be most valuable coming from someone like you.
Tosin, thank you. And, it's when I reflect on my journey as a young woman, navigating multiple economic, cultural, and social challenges, I think, one of the most powerful learnings and a gift that I'd like to share to other women is really, one, start with your own mental health and well-being. Just as we were describing, food-wise, what you put in is what you get out. The same is for the thoughts that you feed yourself. What is it that you're saying to yourself? You need to first become your own champion, your own advocate, and know that you are deserving, of success, that you are deserving of worthiness. You are worthy, you are valued. And, I think if we can create a world where young women have the confidence to recognize the gift and the beauty of their own uniqueness in terms of their skin color, their hair, their talents, this is really important. The second element is to really lean into your sisterhood. I look at our daughter and the friendships that she has and the friendships that I had at school and how they've evolved into a powerful sisterhood later on in my life. I just had a reunion with a friend who turned 50 last month, and it was incredible. This powerful sisterhood where you are safe. It's a safe, psychologically safe space to authentically be yourself. Find your tribe. Find your sisterhood. And your tribe is not only made up of women. Your tribe includes men who are your fellow champions, who are your cheerleaders. One of my great cheerleaders is a really good friend called Samuel Mensah. He's Ghanaian, and we wax lyrical over whether Nigerian or Ghanaian jollof rice is the best, and we're not going to go into that now. But essentially,
the jury is still out on that.
We'll need to have a cook-off for that, Tosin. It's so important that we're able to find and own our voice. Be really comfortable, even if what you're saying creates discomfort in the room. It's so important that you are true to your voice and are true to your values. Be the change that you really want to see. Really incorporate what you want to create. One of my favorite authors is Stephen Covey, and he spoke about the 7 habits of highly effective people. I love the book so much that I actually became a Franklin Covey trainer, to support me in developing teams in my career. And he talks about begin with the end in mind. And it's really about having that vision. What is your vision? And then find people who are living that vision. Reach out to them. research, educate yourself. Education is still one of the most powerful skills that we can invest in. Education is absolutely crucial. I think when it comes to tech, and the evolution of tech, when I look at young women today, I want to encourage them to look at the world that we live in. We live in an era of scale of access, where we can access music, streaming content, podcasts, audiobooks, ebooks, education, a network, mentors, and careers that are global. So my encouragement to young women is to also remind you that you are not only a child of the country or the town that you're born in, you're a child and a girl and a woman of the world. The world is yours. Go out there, create your space, own your space unapologetically. Have fun, know that you deserve it, and let's go create meaningful and positive impact together.
Wow. So much wisdom, so much knowledge and insight packed into that session. And I think on that note where you said, be true to yourself, be the change that you want to see in the world, that is a perfect note on which to end this episode. And no doubt we'll be inviting you back in due course. To our viewers and listeners, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we did. And look out for the next amazing episode of Ready Next.